Okay, so here we are again. Now, very, very important. We are in multiplayer. So we can't just go in here and say, drag from here and say play sound, for example. You just say play sound. You can play the sound 2D, which is used usually for a UI elements when you click on a button. And you can play sound at a location, for example, for footsteps. And you can just go ahead and select the sound. And you can see if I click on play and I run, it's going to play the sound as you can see here. Now, this doesn't really work in multiplayer. The client will not hear the sound because, again, remember, we have to replicate the items to the clients from the server. So let's delete this. Now, this would work in single player, but not multiplayer. Now, for multiplayer, we need to use a multicast. And what a multicast is, let's actually just create it here and I will explain it to you. So let's right click and make a custom event. And this custom event, I'm going to call server first. Let's run it through the server. So server play footsteps sound effects. Okay, and let's click here in the replicates, run it on the server and reliable. And now let's right click down here and make a new custom event. Let's call it MC for multicast. And again, play footsteps sound effects. And for this one, let's click on the replicate. And now we're going to choose multicast and reliable as well. So what a multicast is, it you can imagine it replicates this whatever you write in here to all of the clients. It casts all of these items that you'd write here to all of the clients. And for multicast, it can only run through the server. So you can't come in here and say multicast play sound footstep sound effects because this one you can see it says if server. This only runs through the server. So you can't multicast through the client. So we can't do that. This is why we have to drag from here and run it through the server first, server play footstep sound effects. And then from the server, we can drag and say multicast play footstep sound effects, and that will work perfectly. So you have to run it through the server first. From the server, you can then multicast. Okay, so another explanation as well for multicast that you have to understand is multicasts are usually used for effects that are temporary. For example, if you play a sound effect, because remember, multicast, if a player connects to your game and you have written a code in multicast, the connected player will not be able to see this code. This is where rep notify comes in, and that will come later. Don't worry about it for now. But you can see here, if I click on a variable, if I actually have a variable, if I go to crouch, for example, and I click on my movement state, you can see in the replicated, I also have something called a rep notify, and that will come later. But if we go back and we go back here, so for the multicast, whatever code you write here will not be seen by the connected player unless it plays again. So if I just connect to the game and it just played the running sound effect, I can't hear it unless the player stops and then runs again and plays this code while I am connected to the server. Then it will play correctly. So for the multicast, very, very important is you do something that the connected player doesn't really need to hear or see unless it is played again. For example, now for this footstep sound effect, we can play here, as well as some visual effects. So, for example, some fireworks, and if you open a chest and there are some gold visual effects that come out of this chest, then that needs to run on a multicast as well. The rep notify here, if I click on one of my variables, this rep notify needs to be used whenever you need the connected player to see that change. Let's say, for example, if the player is holding the weapon, for example, an AK or a pistol, a deagle, then this is very important that the connected player needs to see the correct weapon on the player's hands. The weapon you don't really do in a multicast because the connected player will see the wrong weapon on the player. So some games have a lot of bugs because they use multicast for everything. Again, multicast, usually what I use it for is mostly sound effects. and visual effects that don't need to be there all the time. For example, you can see if you have a traffic light that goes from red, yellow, and green, this traffic light, you need like that color, I would probably do inside of a rep notify because that color needs to be visible correctly for the connected player. The connected player needs to see if it's yellow or red and not keep seeing it green until it changes again. But for temporary visual effects, for example, fireworks that disappear after 3 seconds, that really doesn't need to be in a rep notify, that needs to be in a multicast. So whatever is temporary that the connected player doesn't need to see immediately, you have to do it here. And remember, this code has to run again before the connected player can see it. Okay, so let's go ahead and play the sound here. Let's drag from here and say play sound at location. This is how you play a sound. And you can go ahead. Now you have to specify where do you want to play the sound. Now remember, we are coding inside of the player. So I can just drag from here and say get actor location. I'm getting this player's location. So now this sound is going to play wherever this player is. And now we have to select which sound. We're going to select the footsteps. Now, if I click on play and I run around now and I stop, you can hear that the footsteps are playing. And you can also hear it here on the other player. Now, if I open the other player, I can actually hear the sound as well. So this is from the client now. So this is working, okay? So now you can see, you can hear it runs all the time, even though I'm not running. And we also need to fix this in the next lesson. But for now, we know that this sound effect is actually playing. So again, multicast can only be run through the server. You can't run a multicast through the client. So run it through the server. And from the server, you can multicast to temporary sound effects or visual effects that don't need to appear for the connected player. For example, some fireworks or a bullet that you just shot and it will disappear. But for example, which gun the player is holding is really important for the connected player. So that will go inside of a rep notify. And don't worry, we will do this later on. So for now, we don't have much. We only have this sound effect, but we will have a lot of examples through this course. Okay, so to stop the sound effect, whenever we stop over here in the completed, this is whenever we let go of the movement keys. What we can do is we can take the footsteps here, and again, we can clear and invalidate timer by handle. So this will stop this timer from running anymore. So we can go ahead and connect it just like that, and we can compile, and let's try to play it. Now, if we run and I stop here, you can hear nothing. And the reason why, like when you run, the reason why you can't hear all of this is because this keeps running like this really quick and it never reaches this timer before the second movement is running. So it keeps running like this and it never gives it a break to actually go over and set this timer. But we are going to fix this, but you can see here when you add this, the timer actually don't play the sound effect anymore because we are stopping and it clears the timer. And just to make sure that it doesn't bug out, we can always take this footstep handle, we can drag and say valid, and we can use this one is valid timer. So if it is valid, we can make a branch and we can clear this timer like that. Okay, so making sure that this timer is valid and then clearing it. And to make it more clean, you can always just take another instance of this variable and plug it into here. And you can go ahead and organize this a bit more. And now we have this code. Okay, so let's compile. And in the next lesson, let's actually make this less buggy and actually run this code whenever we are running.